Good morning, lovely people, and welcome to the Black Pill Radio Show. I'm your host, Mr. Tyler, and today we have an interesting topic. We are going to be talking about teen trauma, which will fuel adult success. I have three women on my panel today. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a second, but they're going to be talking about their teen experiences and how it has shaped their lives as adults and some of the trauma that they experienced as teens, and they want to give advice and mentor young people and young adults as to not to follow in that path, different ways to think about getting out of those situations so they don't have to experience a lot of the trauma that they experience. As always, please share this podcast, like it, share it, comment. You guys can send us questions via the chat room. Personal friends who know me, you can text me questions and then I'll ask the panelists. So right now I'm going to have them introduce themselves, and then after they introduce themselves, we'll get right into it. So I will have Ashley. Can you briefly introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. Good morning. I am Ashley. I am a founder and CEO of Ladies Back About Dreams and Success, where we encourage women to follow their dreams, empower one another, and make success a priority. I also have a mentor program for younger women, younger girls from grades 5th through 8th. It's called Different Shades of Pretty, where we just basically introduce them to life skills such as learning how to love yourself, learning how to communicate properly to everyone, also learning how to encourage and empower their community of young women. We just basically do that for them to get them on the right path as well. I also have a blog. It's at ladsinspire@wordpress.com. I'm a health wellness coach for Herbalife, and thank you for having me today.
You are welcome, and thank you very much. So next up, we have Witt.
Good morning. So my name is Witt Devereaux. I am a domestic violence survivor and an author of Not By My Own and a blogger. I blog about overcoming and becoming one with God, and I chronicle the different steps that I took to overcome abuse. And for me, I could not do that without my spiritual foundation. I am a mother of two, one of which that I had at a very young age, and I'm an advocate for children with special needs, as well as I work with underserved individuals to get access to quality health care. So the mission that I have through my books, through my blogging, and the different speaking engagements is to inspire, educate, and empower those who are in abusive relationships to be free, and also to enter into a personal relationship with our Father in heaven.
All right, sounds wonderful. And last but not least, we should have Reza on the line.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. My name is Reza. I'm coming to you guys outside of Atlanta, Georgia today. I am a mindset guru and an all-around entrepreneur, creator, and founder of Rich, realizing I create happiness. And what I do is I help people figure out what makes them happy in life. And once you figure that out, I honestly believe that you can really take life by the horns and kind of go wherever you want. So my contribution this morning will be of advice, service, and support. So I'm glad that you guys have me on again today.
Welcome, and I thank all you ladies for joining the panel. So I want to start out with Witt. I want you to tell us, as much as you would like, what your teen years were like, your preteen years, and how did the trauma and some of the issues that came into your life begin?
Okay. Well, I actually had my daughter when I was 18, but before that, I was a typical teenager. I was raised in the suburbs of Chicago and grew up in a two-parent home, went to school. I was involved in different extracurricular activities. So on the outside looking in, I was AKA normal, So when I became pregnant, it was very shocking for everyone. But as I found out later on in therapy as an adult, some of the things that took place when I was actually a child, which was sexual abuse, I had repressed those memories. but it helped to shape some of the decisions that I made, which led me to becoming pregnant at such a young age. So in Chicago, we have this event every year. It's called the Taste of Chicago. And I actually met my oldest daughter's dad there as a teenager. And, you know, he was there by himself. It was kind of weird. I was like with a group of friends, and he was there by himself, but he kind of like led me away from the crowd, even then trying to isolate me and try to talk to me about some of the things that he went through. So we exchanged numbers. I didn't think much about it, but as we began to get closer later on, he shared with me some different things that had occurred in his young life, and me trying to save him and like be this beacon of light, like, hey, you could come around my family, you could come around my dad, who's always been in the household, and we can try to help you, you know, get back on the right track, because he was heavily involved with some very negative things. And so I felt like if I could help him, if I could save him, then I would ultimately be helping to turn his life around. But in the process, I got lost and I got pulled down, and ultimately led to me becoming pregnant at 18 years old.
So how old were you when you guys met?
I was 17. He was 16. And, like, for the first couple of months that we dated, we only actually dated a couple of months before he went to juvenile detention. He was a minor at the time. And so my dad used to take me, like when he got out of the juvenile detention center, he got into another issue where he ended up going to the county, and they were charging him as an adult. And so my dad used to take me to visit him, because still we have this mindset that we're going to help him, we're going to show him that he has support. We felt like I had convinced my father that if we could show him that he had support, then, you know, we could help him from avoiding to go back and forth to jail, but obviously that was not the case. So between 17 and 18 years old, I would go and visit him while he was incarcerated. So he finally came out. He came out when I was 18.
So were you pregnant when you were visiting him, or you weren't pregnant yet?
Nope, I wasn't pregnant at all. I got pregnant at 18, and it was 3 months before I turned 19 when I had the baby. So I knew him for about a year, but most of his time away was in jail. But when he came out, immediately I got pregnant. So it wasn't very long of me actually knowing him. Like I said, most of the time he was away in jail.
So to be clear,
came out,
your dad was taking you to visit a youth who's a repeat offender, who's in jail or in a detention center twice. This is even before you got pregnant. Do you feel like your dad plays a role in your teen pregnancy?
Yeah, you know, my mom used to, it caused a lot of dissension in the home, because my mom was like, what are you doing? Like, you're taking her to see this person when you should be rid of him. Like, she was very upset. But my dad and my mom, sometimes he would do things to try to just appease his children, but out of spite of my mom. And so he figured he was helping me, and he took me anyway. So, yeah, in a way, he kind of aided the process of me getting pregnant. But when we talk about it now, like, I don't blame him. I know that they did teach me different things about my body. I just had the idea that, you know, I was different and that I could help him. And like I said, it ultimately brought me down.
Okay, so as a teen, what other issues did you get into once you became a teen mom?
Okay, so once I became a teen mom, like I said, I was 18 going on 19. I ended up moving to a little town outside of a college unit. So I still wanted to be able to fit in. I was still technically a teenager, So what I used to do, I would bring my daughter all the way back to the other side of town where my family lived so that I would still be able to hang out with my friends. And I started falling into a life of, like, drunkenness. I would be getting high a lot of the time. But I was pretty much turning into a functioning alcoholic, which alcoholism runs deep in my bloodline. So most days, even though I was going to school, going to my work study, I was drunk. And sometimes my daughter would be in an environment where I was getting high, like in the next room. And when I'm speaking of getting high, it was marijuana. And so I was a little bit out of control. I was trying to keep up with what other people were doing. And in the midst of that, I was still dating her father off and on, and he himself was very abusive towards me. And so I was involved in the drugs, involved with alcoholism. I was still going to school, but barely passing any classes. It was a big struggle in my life. And, you know, I felt like I could see myself being out of control, but I was just trying so hard to fit in with other people who didn't have any kids. It was just me. And so if they wanted to drink, get high and all that, they didn't really have anybody to answer to. But I had this young baby with me as I was engaging in these very negative activities. And so that was between 19 and 20 that I was out there. Her dad, when I speak about abuse, it wasn't just physical. Like, he was definitely physically abusive. I have sustained, like, black eyes and a sprained ankle. All of this actually it happened in front of my child. And it was a while before I finally realized. She was about 11 months old when I finally left him and decided that I needed to do better with no longer the drugs, the alcohol, the partying every weekend, and leaving him and seeking help to get out of the domestic violence relationship that I was in.
So your dad was taking you to see him while he was incarcerated. And then once you guys started living together, I guess, or seeing each other a lot, and the abuse started, the physical abuse, what role did your dad play then?
You know, my dad, for a while I was hiding it. A lot of people didn't know that he was abusing me. But my dad, he never really talked much about it. I think internally, my dad is a very passive man. He internalizes a lot of things. So while it was happening, when I finally did share with them that it was happening, it was my mom and my sisters that were more vocal and trying to get me out of the situation. I don't have a clear memory of my father, like, sitting down talking to me about it then while it was happening, once he did find out what was going on. But now we have had conversations in my adulthood where he acknowledges that it was happening. But there's never been the conversation where we say, well, why did you take me to the jail? We haven't had that conversation. Mm-mm.
All right, so I'm going to come back to your story, but now I want to shift to Ashley. And Ashley, I want you to tell us about your situation as a preteen and teen.
Okay. Well, it started around the age of 6 would be the first time that I encountered sexual abuse. I was molested by a family member. It was a woman, or a girl, because we were like the same age. And then I would say it ended around the age of 10. That's whenever I guess I got the courage to know that this was not right, and this is not what, I'm not going to keep doing this as a 10-year-old. With that happening so young, and I never spoke about it to my mother at the time. I guess in my mind as a child, I was afraid of what could happen. That's what I would say, which is probably what a lot of young people who go through that think as well. But that affected me in a way where I did not like women at all. I was insecure with my body. That made me very insecure as a child. and I really did not like women. I had friends, but as a teen, usually whenever you're a teen girl, you guys can go in the dressing room together, you change clothes, they're like, oh, that skirt's cute, or as a teen girl, you guys, I guess what the word I should use, they compliment you on your development sometimes. Oh, those pants look great on you, whatever like that. I would get offended in that way. I didn't want anyone to look at me. It was just I don't know, I can't really explain the word I want to say, but it was a time where I just didn't want anyone to touch me, didn't want to look at me. I was just so, I did not like women at all because of that situation. I got to a point where I didn't want to keep feeling like that. And this is even as, as a growing teen. But I turned to men. My mom, she was a hard worker. She worked all the time. I was a good student, straight A's. GPA was 4.0 in high school. I got a full scholarship to go to one of the top universities in the city of Evansville, Indiana, that I live in. But I was, so I was a good student. I was a good girl. No one thought anything that Ashley would do. I didn't turn to drugs or drinking. I still don't do that to this day. But I was, I was introduced to a guy through a friend. This is around the age 15, 16. And at the time, he was 20, 21. So that's the first red flag. But he was a great guy. I'm thinking that he's awesome. This is a good guy. He's older than me. He understands me, whatever. I ended up being pregnant at 16. My mom didn't know he was 21 at the time. My dad didn't know he was 21 at the time. My dad doesn't live here in the city, but we always kept in contact, and I always visited him. So I was 16 and pregnant. He obviously didn't want anything. He didn't want me to have the child. So I actually was going to go through with getting an abortion, because at the time I didn't want the child either. I'm like, what is this? I'm pregnant. I don't know what that means. And it was just very hard for me to deal with. So at the time that I was all the way up to getting to the procedure done, I was further along than I thought I was. So they couldn't do the procedure. And that's the day that I decided to go ahead and just have my daughter and, become a parent. And after that day, I actually felt good about being a mom. So I had my daughter at 17. He's now in my daughter's life now, but at the time that he wasn't in there. After that, I did not date him anymore. We just had a child together. I ended up meeting a guy when I went to a college in the summer after high school, and he was a nice guy. As always, they always start out nice. He just seemed like he would be a good fit for me at the time. I liked him. He liked me. Then he became abusive. He was physically abusive, verbal abusive, and then he would be nice sometimes. That's kind of how they are. He would always talk down about me. He would actually fuel my insecurity. He would make me more insecure than I already was. He would hit me as I'm driving. He would push my car into park. He would, slap me as I'm driving. I had black lips. He busted my lip inside. No one really knew that I was going through this, not even my close friends, because I wouldn't tell them. I was just, once again, afraid of what would happen if I told what is going on with me. Eventually, it was interrupting. Like I said, I got accepted to one of the top colleges. It was interrupting my learning and my concentration of my, of the class that I was in the school that I was going to. So I ended up, I don't want to say running away, but I ended up going down to Atlanta, Georgia with my father. Me and my daughter went down there. And I would say when I was down there, I was able to find myself because that's whenever I became confident in myself. And I told myself no one could ever break me down. I was never going back to that life that I was in with him. And ever since then, I just became the woman I am today, the woman I'm becoming today. I don't do drugs, like I said. I don't drink. I was around drugs with the guy who abused me because he was a drug dealer. So he was always having me and my daughter in situations where I could have got my daughter taken away. I could have been in prison to this day. So I never, I think after I left and came back here as a new woman in my head, I never wanted to be around that again. And I would say this: there's no way I will ever become insecure again, because I've actually cleaned that out of my system.
Okay, thank you for sharing. We're going to come back to you as well because there's some points I want to touch on because you and Witt have a lot of similarities. But I want to move to Ritza now. And Ritza, tell us what your preteen and teen years were like.
Okay, so I was born actually in the country of Port-au-Prince, Haiti, so I am Haitian. I was separated from my mother at the age of 2 years old. I came to the States with my father and my oldest sister, and I was molested from the age of 5 years old to about 9 years old, just like Ashley was saying, from a woman as well, but she was actually an older woman, and my father had an affair with her on my mom, and the woman ended up getting pregnant. And I didn't know this at the time, but as I got older, stories come out and stuff. But I found out that she was actually pregnant a few times before she had the child that she has now, which would be considered my little sister. And I guess every time she must have got pregnant, my father, I guess trying to hide the affair from my mom, would make her go and have an abortion. So, of course, with any woman, you're in love with a man and you're getting pregnant, you think it's supposed to be the happiest time of your life, and you actually come to find out that he doesn't even want the child. So, of course, she turned her rage and her anger towards me because she wasn't able to, reach my mom physically. So I was molested, like I said, from the age of 5 to 9, and that really, with me, it caused conflict when I was younger. I started questioning myself and saying, oh, maybe if I was a better kid, maybe if I listened more, maybe if I wasn't so loud. I was one of those kids that really had like a real wild imagination. That's kind of why I feel like entrepreneurship has always been my life's calling, because I never fit into the norm. I never fit into the box. And I guess that kind of, I don't know if it rubbed her the wrong way or if it just bothered her, but she always, whenever she was angry, whenever she was upset, she always brought the rage out on me. So fast forward, my mom ended up coming to America when I was about 8 or 9 years old. So, of course, I left that home and went to go live with my mother. But then it caused another friction because now it was just like my mother came into this country. She doesn't speak any English, and I speak my native, language of Creole. But because now that I'm in America, I'm speaking more English than I am Creole. So me and my mom kind of had like a communication barrier. And like Ashley was saying, I was scared to tell anybody anything. Because I felt like they wouldn't believe me. I was a child and I was young. And then I remember when I got to ninth grade, I went to a predominantly all African-American school, and the kids were just really, really different than I was. And I just always felt, like I said, like I just never fit in. And they would call me, the black white girl, because I got good grades, and, I wasn't really up to my fashions the way that I am now, because my parents kind of just bought whatever they could, because they were just always really working. So I was really pretty much left to raise myself, I would say. So it got me into a lot of things that I didn't need to get into. I started hanging around the wrong people. As I got older into high school, I started experimenting with marijuana. I started drinking. I started becoming rebellious. And all those things really stemmed from the molestation because I didn't know how to deal with it. I hadn't told anybody about it. And I remember one day I went to school, and I was just so fed up, and I was just so tired. I went to my guidance counselor, and I just spit out what happened. I just told her what happened. And they ended up getting, of course, at the time, I guess there was Child Protective Services involved and things of that nature. And they ended up coming to the house. They ended up having a conversation with my parents. And my parents didn't believe me. Like, they really thought that I was lying. And I was so shocked. And I was like, see, this is why I didn't say anything, because I just knew it, that nobody was going to believe me. And I'll never forget, I had one of my cousins, which is on my father's side, her mother and my father are brother and sister. And I remember she called me and she asked me to tell her what happened and everything. And at the end of the conversation, she told me, she said, Ritza, she said, I believe you, because she knew the woman as well. And she said, I could definitely see her doing something of that sort. So that gave me some type of, comfort, but it didn't really help me the way that I needed to. So it really led me into that path. When I turned 18, I started dancing. Basically started escorting, just really looking for a way to fill that void, really looking for a way to fill in that love. Because like I said, my parents were in my life, but they worked so much, it's like they weren't there. Like they were always at work, always at work. And by the time they got home from work, they were so tired and so exhausted, there was really nothing, like to talk about. My mother was really strict, so it was no talk of like sex in the house and boys, and I kind of grew up really stern. Especially I tell people all the time, I grew up in America, but I grew up in a Haitian household, so I grew up completely different than my friends. Then when I turned 22, I found out I was pregnant with my daughter, who's now 6. And it always, before I got pregnant by her father, I just always had bad relationships. Like, I was dealing with the worst of the worst type of guys. And I knew that they were bad, but I was looking for that love, so I really didn't care that they were bad. So I ended up getting pregnant with my daughter. He is still to this day not a part of her life. He just absolutely wanted nothing to do with it, nothing at all. And then after I had her at 23. Then when I turned 25, I just got to a point where I said, Ritza, enough is enough. There has to be a change. You have to deal with this problem. You have to deal with this situation because you can't continue to go on through your life like this. And I knew that if I continued like this, it was going to affect not only my daughter's life, but my relationship that I had with my own child. So I began to get some spiritual counseling. I began to really get myself, closer to God. I began to read my Bible. I began to praise and worship. And I just really asked God just to help me because I didn't want to continue to live like this anymore. I didn't want to continue to be in those bad relationships. I didn't want to continue to keep attracting those negative people because I was being negative, and I didn't know that I was being negative. So now at the age of 29, thank God, I found my fiance 2 years ago who was absolutely amazing, and him and I just had a child on August 7th, a little boy. And it's an everyday process. I can say that molestation overall, I definitely have forgiven that person and I've moved on from that. But I went through so much as a teenager that now it's like I'm still, digging up a lot of gunk and junk. But I can definitely say that I thank God that I'm not where I used to be, definitely in my mind. So that's why my mission in life is to definitely help women and young girls understand that, a lot of times, like I say, it's not necessarily what happened to you. It's kind of how you perceive what happened to you, which is in your mind. So once I really started to change that, and I forgave myself, which I can say is the biggest thing, especially as women. Like when we get into these situations, we knock ourselves down so much and we beat up on ourselves and we say, oh my God, it's my fault. And even though it could be, but we're so hard on ourselves that we never let it go. So I would definitely say to anybody that is listening that has suffered molestation or is going through it now or knows someone that is going through it, first and foremost, absolutely forgive the person that has violated you in the worst way possible, but then at the same time, forgive yourself and know that it wasn't your fault.
So let's leave it right there. So thank you for sharing your story because we're going to come back to some of the things you said as well because you have certain parallels that go along with Witt and Ashley. So I want to bring it back to Witt. When we talk about parental responsibility, I know you mentioned a lot about your dad, but where was your mom in all of this?
Well, my mom was there. She, like I said, her and my dad would fight a lot and argue a lot about him taking me up there. But she actually shared with me that she had given up fighting against him to try to prove to him that he was doing the wrong thing. She had pretty much given up on fighting with him taking me back and forth. But initially, they would be going back. It caused a lot of dissension in the home. And when I got pregnant, my dad is actually the one who took me to, there's a little pregnancy center that was near their home. I didn't tell him that it was a pregnancy center because it looked like a house. I had found the information actually on a bus stop ad and called and made an appointment. And initially I was thinking that the center was a place where they would help me to get an abortion because I knew that if I had confided in them and telling them that I was pregnant, that would be what they wanted me to do. It was not necessarily something that I wanted to do, but I just didn't see how I could have a baby, and I was trying to go to college. And so after I booked the appointment, I had my dad take me. I told him that I just needed to meet with someone, and he believed me. He actually sat in the car and waited for me, and I went inside, and the lady actually did the test for me, the pregnancy test. And when I came out and she told me that it was positive, she actually asked if she could pray with me and shared that her sister had aborted her baby and never forgave herself. And she didn't want me to make the same mistake. So when I went there, initially I'm thinking, okay, they're going to tell me my options. abortion, adoption, something like that. But she actually prayed with me that I keep the baby and that God would provide. And so after that prayer, I went out to the car, and I was just, like, pretty silent, me and my dad. And I asked him, do you understand where I went? Do you know what this place is? And he's like, no. So I explained that it was a pregnancy center, and again, the silence. Like I said, he never really talked about it, any of the things that were going on. It's very passive and very quiet. So when we got home, I knew that I had to tell my mother because it's just not something that you can hide, being pregnant. And so I went into her room and I sat down and I explained to her that I had gone to a center and I found out that I was pregnant. And, like, it was chaos from there. She was highly upset. She blamed him. Of course, the cursing out ensued between one another. And she told me basically that my only option was the abortion. So from there, after having that woman pray for me, I had already made up in my mind that I couldn't go through with it. I had grew up, with a relationship with Christ, and so I knew, like, for my own personal reasons, that I couldn't do it. But having her tell me that basically that was the only option made me want to get away from them. And so I prepared myself to relocate. That's how I ended up going to the college town where they had a lot of resources for moms, because she basically told me she wasn't going to help me. And like I said, she blamed my father for him taking me and saying if he hadn't have done that, I would not be pregnant. But her only solution for the pregnancy was to terminate it.
So I have another question, because Ashley mentioned something about she dated a drug dealer. And you talked about your boyfriend being abusive. So was he involved in any activity like that as well?
Absolutely. So part of his charges, and the reason why he was charged as an adult, had to do with drug dealing and serving, like, in front of a school, an elementary school. So he was not only doing drugs, but he was selling drugs, robbing people in broad daylight, a lot of crazy stuff. There was actually a time where we were riding in the car and his siblings were in the back seat. And by this time I had my daughter. So this is before I finally decided to leave him. She was in the back, just a few months old. And we got pulled over by the police. And so he hands me the drugs and he's like, you need to stick this, Basically, I needed to take the drugs, insert them inside of me, so that if the police were to search him, which they did, they wouldn't find all the drugs that he had. And me still in the mindset of trying to protect him and show him that I am his quote-unquote ride or die, that I'm there for him, I inserted the drugs inside of me. And thankfully, because the police officers had searched him and didn't find anything and saw that there were children in the back, they let us go. There were other times where we would get pulled over and we were underage drinking, because all this happened before we was 21. And, it was just God's grace that they did not arrest us. There was a time where we were pulled over. We were actually pulling up into a liquor store that we knew would sell to us, being underage. And I had friends in another car, and the friends come and sit in the car with me, and I'm like seeing that these people are eyeing us, and by now I'm like, they must be undercover. And so the person that I was with, my daughter's dad, he had put the drugs, like, in a CD case, but he had some alcohol that was open in the front seat. So I'm telling my friends, y'all need to get out the car. I was trying to be as discreet as possible, but they did not get out. So the undercover cops, like, they were looking at us. They opened the door, and they were searching everything, but they did not go in that CD case. But they found the alcohol, threw it out, and said, y'all need to get out of here. There was a couple times where I was with him. He had the drugs on him. And it was nothing but grace. Like, some people might call it luck, but I just feel I was blessed not to be tied up in the mess that he was in
So
with the
basically,
drugs and illegal activity.
so basically, you're very fortunate that you weren't incarcerated, and I assume his drug dealing was a way for you guys to support yourselves.
Well, it was really, because we were so young when he was doing it, it was really something that he did for himself. Surprisingly, like, I used to work at a restaurant, like a little McDonald's or whatever. So I was supporting myself with that money. It wasn't much, but he didn't never buy me anything with those, the money that he made. It was so crazy because this is where the financial abuse comes in. So, like, my refund check, I would give him from my little McDonald's job. He's supposed to flip the money to try to make us some more money, but he would just take the money and go buy himself things, nothing for me or my baby. And so it was a lot of craziness that went on with that situation, but no, I was not incarcerated. I was never tied, thankfully. He's still facing incarceration to this day, but thankfully I'm away from all of that, and my daughter is not involved.
So I want to move on. Let me move on to Ashley. Sorry to interrupt you. Ashley,
No problem.
how did you and your boyfriend support yourselves, being that you guys were teen parents?
Well, he wasn't my daughter's dad.
Right.
He was just boyfriend, but he sold drugs. I worked at McDonald's, and my mom didn't disown me or nothing like that. Like, I was still, she didn't, at the time whenever things started getting, I guess, a little rough, where I was staying out all night with my daughter and him and staying in hotels here and there because the house he was in got raided, so he didn't obviously go back over there. And my mom was more so like, your daughter needs to be in a home, stable home. She needs to be in bed. And in my head, I'm like, I have my daughter with me, so I'm still a good parent, and she's sleeping in here. I'm still feeding her. But, as a woman now, as a mother of two now, no, that's not giving your child the best, parenting skills. So he sold the drugs. I worked at McDonald's, so I was able to support myself, and then I was staying with my mom. But I would give him money sometimes, which is kind of baffling because if you're selling drugs, why would I give you my McDonald's check? But not the whole thing. I would give him some money though. He would buy me stuff here and there, which is, I guess, important as a child or as a teenager. He would use my car. We would get in arguments because he would leave it with no gas, but he didn't really support me. He supported himself, and I supported myself and gave him money if, I felt like giving it to him sometimes. Or if he made a big deal of, I need this money.
So let me interrupt you for a second. So I noticed a trend that you and Witt are working minimum wage jobs, but yet you're giving money to men who are drug dealers.
Right.
That's a trend.
Yeah.
So we got to look at that as we start to help our youth. And I want to come to Reza. Reza, I know you said you were escorting and dancing, so I know that's how you were making your money. So were you involved with any men who were doing anything illegal as well?
Oh, God, yes. I think it's funny because I think me and the two other ladies have a lot more in common than we actually realized before getting on this call. But I actually worked at McDonald's myself. I actually just left McDonald's, I want to say, in April of 2015 because I ended up finally coming into corporate America, quote unquote, as I like to call it. But my daughter's father as well, when I met him, he was selling drugs. I found out I was pregnant in 2010 with her in August of 2010. And it was the same thing, like he was selling drugs, but he wasn't really giving me any money. He wasn't really doing anything. And I was like, oh, my God, I have this child on the way. He's not doing anything, so I have to help him go get a job. And I ended up getting the McDonald's job because my little brother at the time, he was like 15 or 16. That was one of his first jobs. And he was really cool with the store manager. And he told me, hey, one day they're having an open house, or I guess open interviews or whatever. And I went up there, and she literally, I was honest with her. I said, look, I was like, I'm pregnant. Guy's not doing anything. I'm not trusting him to step up and be there. I was like, I need to work. And she basically hired me on the spot. And I think like that following week, once my paperwork and everything came back, I started, and I was literally there up until April 2015. But yeah, I definitely dealt with drug dealers. I think my fiance now is the only guy that I've dealt with that hasn't sold drugs. And it makes you, I don't know if it's a security thing. I don't know if it's like Ash said, like, when you're young, you just kind of think like it's cool. I really don't know what it was or what I was thinking at that time, but I definitely did. I did the same thing. I would give them money out of my check, which it was crazy because you're making more than me selling drugs, and I'm just working this little, regular part-time, full-time job that's really not making much, but I'm giving you money. I think Witt said it as far as like he's supposed to flip it and stuff, and that never happened. So, yeah, I definitely dealt with that with drug dealers, with scammers, with dudes that was robbing. I mean, you name it, I think I've come across it and I've dealt with it. And I got to a point where I said, okay, you know what, I can't keep doing this anymore, because I just felt like it was going to get to a point that either I was going to get incarcerated or like a lot of girls that I see nowadays, I was going to end up getting pregnant and then like the guy just not be there. I mean, like he gets shot or something happened and, he ends up deceased. So I definitely dealt with that as well. And then I just got to a point where I just said, okay, I can't do this anymore. Once my daughter started probably reaching about the age of 2 years old, I just realized that wasn't a good example for her, because I didn't want her to grow up and start feeling like that wasn't okay. And then if I tried to tell her something about it, she would just be like, well, I saw you do it, and then it's kind of like you really can't say anything because it's true.
All right, so let's move on to my next phase of this conversation, which is how do we help? Because collectively, as panelists, you guys have dealt with child molestation, teen pregnancy, abuse as a teen, abuse as a child, abuse as a young adult. You guys are doing criminal activity, dating men who are involved in criminal activity, giving your minimum wage check to men who are supposedly making more money than you. And it's just a bunch of bad decisions. And then some of the family members are not believing what you're going through, kind of enabling some of the bad choices that you guys are making. And then you guys admittedly said you didn't share a lot of the information or a lot of the bad things that were going on with you, with your parents or your friends as well. So we got to take responsibility for that. But as adults who have matured and learned and have become educated, and now you guys are working with the youth and young adults, what do you guys do specifically? Like, are you guys in a building, an organization? Is it an online thing? What your mentoring services and what you guys offer? And how can people also find you, which we'll talk about later, but we want to get into that part of it as well. So I'm going to start with Witt. So what are you doing now giving back to the youth?
Okay, well, I actually, my full-time job, like I said, is in healthcare. And so I do service a lot of individuals with families that are dealing with trauma. And so I try to live a life of service, even at work, helping them to find different resources with counseling or community services. And myself, I serve through my church. Our church is in an urban community where a lot of these issues are taking place. And so I try to serve in our different outreach projects. But most importantly, most of my things are happening online right now with my blogging services. That's free, and I just started an online group for people to have as a safe haven. I started doing speaking engagements last month, which targeted families as a whole, because I wanted to help them with healing as a family unit. A lot of times we didn't talk about these things in my family. And so in my home, I have a very open dialogue. I have 2 daughters. One is 12, one is 7. And I talk very open to them about honoring their body, about being able to speak up even when it's uncomfortable, about people not touching them in those private places. That's the word that I use. It's private. And just honoring themselves. And so in the home, in the church, in my community, I'm just trying to create the dialogue. And through my books that I've published, I have 2 books out now, I talk about my own testimony in overcoming generational curses, starting with me experiencing sexual abuse as a child and how that affected me. So every book that's purchased, actually in October, I'll be donating to a program called the Wings Program, which is in the Chicagoland area, to help them. They have like a full-service shelter, and store for moms who are seeking to leave their abuser and their children. So those are the ways that I've been helping thus far and will and going forward.
So what are the name of your 2 books and how can people purchase them?
So the first one, where I said that it chronicles me overcoming the generational curses of abuse, it's called Not By My Own. It's available on my website, which is wittdevereaux.com, and also on amazon.com. I recently uploaded it to a site called smashwords.com, which makes it available online for the Barnes & Noble store and also for all the iPhone people. They can get it on iBooks. The other book that I collaborated on, I'm actually an author with other women from around the world who share the same type of testimony on women empowerment, encouragement, overcoming rejection, low self-esteem, and security. That book is called Unraveling the Layers, Memoirs of a Wounded Soul. And it has testimonies, it has poetry, and that's available also on amazon.com and my website, wittdevereaux.com.
Excellent. So now I want to move on to Ashley. And Ashley, what are you doing in your community and even the online community, the global community, to give back and mentor to our youth and young adults?
So to our youth, like I said, I have a mentor program for young girls in the grades of 5th through 8th. It's called Different Shades of Pretty. We haven't spoke anything about, like abuse. I haven't got to that part yet. I don't think we're going to reach that. I just want to make sure they know how to love themselves. So we do speak a lot of self-love talk. We also speak a lot of like self-esteem and just ways to, empower and encourage themselves to be them and confidence, because sometimes I feel like that may be what caused me. When you go into the insecure mode, you allow anything to happen to you. So I haven't spoke about that to them. I don't think we're going to even reach that, but just more so fueling them with self-love and self-respect. We do that. We just started that actually in September, and we go through until December, until like their first, their school, I guess, before they go on the winter break. And then after winter break, next year we'll have another semester with different, maybe another pool of different girls or the same. As far as women, with my other business, Ladies About Dreams and Success, basically I have reached out to, we've done a couple different donations and collab with the YWCA, which they have a lot of women in there with domestic violence experiences. So we do a lot of things with them as far as donating to them and what they need as far as household products or just daily feminine products that they need. Also, I'm working on something with a couple different people in the community about a program, basically Broken But Healed, because I've been through, obviously molestation and teen pregnancy and abuse and everything like that, and I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one, obviously, from this call. So I want to basically let them know that, I want a program that we can speak about things like this and kind of overcome them, because if you're not going to speak about it, there's no way you can overcome it. You have to forgive yourself and forgive whomever it was so you can grow out of that. So that's a few things that I'm working on with the community in the city that I'm in at this time. Online, I don't have a website for the Youth Mentor Program. We do have an Instagram platform, which is just Different Shades of Pretty. And I do have a blog for lads or Ladies About Dreams and Success. It's ladsinspire.wordpress.com. And the website for Ladies About Dreams and Success is coming soon.
All right, sounds excellent. And Reza, how are you giving back to the youth and the young adults in your community?
So like I said, my organization that I started is called Rich, Realizing That I Create Happiness. And what I do is I really deal with young women also that have, been molested and that deal with self-esteem issues, but also that have a lot of issues with their mother. Because like I said, being pulled away from my mom at a young age, that caused me to have some type of resentment and animosity towards her, feeling like, she gave me up, feeling like she didn't want me. And I feel like, especially in the African-American community, there is a lot of disconnect between our young girls and their mothers. And I feel that sometimes it's not that the mothers or the daughters necessarily want it to be that way. I just feel like we don't necessarily always know how to communicate with each other. The child doesn't know how to express how she feels, and the mother, I think, a lot of times, and I've seen in cases where I've spoken to, clients and stuff, the mother still carries a lot of shame, still carries a lot of embarrassment for the decisions that she made in her life, and not really realizing how to express those things to her daughter. So I really just kind of, help them break through those barriers and then get to a point where I just ask them the question, what makes you happy? And I believe that once that happens and those things are figured out, then we begin to put into play a game plan to whether it's a tangible thing or whether it's a business that they want to open or places that they want to go. Everybody has different dreams and, definitions of success. And then once we get those things together, then those young ladies and their mothers are also able to work on their relationships and flourish in those, but also within themselves. I do have a blog that I definitely am starting. I haven't got a domain or anything for it yet. I'm still working on that. But I definitely do things locally in my community, at the community center or the YMCA. I do things, with my church and things of that nature. And just really letting these young girls know that, one, like I said, it's not your fault. And two, just really to get into that space of realizing that you are worthy and that you are worth it and that you can do it, and don't let the things that have happened from your past really, affect your future, and to really stay stuck there, to forgive, like I said, not only the offender, but definitely to forgive yourself so that you can begin to move on with your life.
Sounds wonderful. So now I have a question for the three of you ladies, because I'm curious about the demographic that you guys help. Because I don't have any males on this panel to share. I tried to get a couple of brothers to come on and share their experiences, but that didn't work out. So what are we doing for our young boys? Anyone could take that.
Well, this is Ashley. I have a son, so he's 6, and since that happened to me, I make sure both of my children know, the right and the wrong, and your body is yours. And even though he's a boy, that happens to boys too, and men probably don't talk about it as much as women do. So I try to make sure I enforce that in him as far as protecting yourself and what no one else. This is yours. No one else is supposed to, be in your space. As far as programming wise, I'm not a part of any type of program that uplifts the men or the young boys. The mentoring program actually is in the same building as another mentor program for young men. So I see that in the community happening. I just personally haven't reached out to actually get any help for it. I have been speaking with another person that is in the community as far as doing something for the men, or for like a unisex thing in general, like for men and women. And that broken but healed program that I'm working on, he has spoke about including anyone that has been broken and healed. So maybe I'll have something for you later on. And see how that went with the men and the women.
Yeah, because we don't want to forget about our young boys. I know there's a lot of mentoring programs out there for the boys, but these men are being raised in single households, single female households, and they're being raised by a lot of women who suffered this trauma and who have, some subconscious maybe negative things about males, but yet they're raising men, and the generational cycle now is that, we're like 2 cycles in, maybe 3 cycles in of men who are just raised by single women, and they're just doing a lot of negative things. I mean, you guys mentioned a lot of guys you dated are selling drugs. They're abusive. They're neglective, right? So if these women are going to continue to be single and not be married when they have these children, no men around when they're having these children, and then they're raising these young boys, and these young boys become men who are not, uplifting members of our community, it's a problem. So we definitely need to stem that cycle. So I'm going to throw this question out to either Witt or Reza. Are you guys raising any young boys? And the second part of the question is, are you guys doing anything or partnering with anyone to include young boys or teen boys or young male adults in your programs?
This is
Witt. I'll go first.
Go ahead, Witt.
Mine is pretty short. Yeah, I don't have any sons. I have a nephew that I'm pretty involved with. He's just a little bitty baby. The program that I'm donating some of my book proceeds to in October, the Wings program, they service children that are both boys and daughters. So that will help with that. I just started with the different speaking engagements, so I'm actually looking into nearby schools that I can go into to speak and partner with to talk to the classroom as a whole, and not just girls, because actually I know the other ladies shared that they were molested by women, but the person that I was touched by was a boy, actually. So I do want to do more going forward with that population.
Okay, and Reza?
Yes, I am actually raising a son that I said I had on August 7th, so he's still a teeny baby himself. But my fiance, definitely, he is a part of the Big Brother and Big Sister program, and he does a lot of work with the young boys, and I think that stems from him being adopted when he was younger, and him not really having a solid foundation with his adopted family. That once he pretty much turned 18, he kind of just like walked away from trying to, find himself and everything like that. So I haven't gotten too much into the boys yet, but I'm definitely looking to do that. And like Witt said, working with speaking engagements, because I do think that it is very important. And like you said, Tyler, there are a lot of women right now, especially in this generation, that are raising a lot of young boys on their own. And I'm not saying that a woman can't raise a son. I think a lot of women do it marvelously, miraculously. But I do think that it is important for whether it is his biological father or a father figure to definitely have that in his life, because us as women, we can't teach them, how to be a man, because there are just certain body parts and certain things that they go through that we don't. And you can, always offer the best type of advice and things of that nature, but you're really not going to hit it on the head, because you're kind of, not the same makeup as him. So I do think that is important. I do think that we shouldn't forget about them. And hopefully I always say that I pray that once we see maybe a change in the young boys, then we can see a change, hopefully, in the young girls as well. So that is definitely on my to-do list.
Excellent. So, ladies, I'm going to ask you for some advice, right? Because I'm going to put out a meme tomorrow that's going to list the advice that you guys give today. So I want to know 2 things that a young teen, older teen, young adult can start doing today, or a way they can feel starting today that's going to carry them forward, so they can overcome some of the traumas they might be going through or may have been through. So we'll start with Ashley. If you can tell me 2 things or 2 pieces of advice you would give to a young person who's been through something similar to what you've been through, what would that be?
If it doesn't feel right, leave it or stop it. And communication is always the key, no matter what the outcome will be.
Excellent. And now we're going to go to Miss Witt.
Okay. For me, I would encourage them to speak out. Don't live in shame or fear, and to remember that it's not your fault as well. 'Cause a lot of times we blame ourselves for what happened to us. So speak out and remember it's not your fault.
Excellent. And last but not least, Miss Fritz.
My whatever advice would definitely be to
90
be
seconds.
your authentic self. Just be yourself. I feel that, especially as young girls, that was my issue. I just always felt like I had to fit in. We deal with, especially nowadays, kids deal with so much of peer pressure and how to look and what to look like and what to wear and everything else. And just so that you don't have to go with the crowd, just fit into your own box, go outside of the norm, do things different. Don't be like everybody else. And 9 times out of 10, when you usually do that, that usually when a lot of people kind of
60 seconds.
you and like you, and just know that, you are who God created you to be, and those that are for you are going to be with it, and those that aren't, you didn't need them anyway. So just be your true, authentic self all the time in every situation, all across the board.
Thank you, ladies, for sharing your stories and sharing some advice for our young adults, our young teens. It's very important that they have mentorship and people who are involved in their lives and people who care about them and people who support them. And to the parents out there and the future parents out there, please share this podcast, because it's going to be very helpful for people who are going through some traumatic situations that still might not have healed. still might be going through it. Some of the advice that the lady shared today might be helpful for them. As always, check out our show. It's every first and third Sunday morning from 10 a.m. to
10 seconds.
11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's Black Pill Radio. The website is blackpillradio.com. The resources will be posted tomorrow. Thank you for listening.